She could have given birth anywhere, in a forest, in a cave, on a rocky ledge, but she chose an old barn. She chose people who never asked to be chosen. It was just after dawn when Maria heard a weak breathing, a small cry coming from behind the wooden wall. At first she thought it might be a bird or a rabbit trapped in something, but Tom heard it too, and they both entered the barn. The air was cold and still, loaded with concern. There, under a blanket of old hay, they found 3 small lynx kittens with their eyes still closed, their tiny bodies huddled against the cold. But that wasn't the most surprising thing. There she was, the mother. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't fleeing. She stood at a certain distance in silence, watching. She didn't show her teeth. She didn't growl. She just looked. Maria knelt carefully without touching anything, barely breathing. The lynx blinked once and stayed. She didn't run to the trees. She didn't try to hide her young. She waited, observed, as if she had been waiting for these people. The reason for that choice would stay with Maria for a long time. It wasn't a sudden apparition. The neighbors had seen her before. A red lynx moving like smoke among the grove, always alone, always distant. She never approached the pastures or the houses, just a fleeting glimpse among the pines. But Maria remembered a day in late autumn when the trees were beginning to clear and the morning frost still covered the ground. She had gone to check a loose fence post, and about 20 paces away, she saw the lynx. She didn't flee. She made no noise. She just looked at her, her amber eyes meeting Maria's. She didn't seem curious or frightened, just present. Then she turned and disappeared among the trees, as silent as snow. Now Maria thought about that moment, seeing her standing so still in the barn with the same calm and unwavering gaze. Had she grown up nearby, listening and watching? Or had she arrived fleeing from something? Hunger, fire, human predators? They would never know. But something was clear to Maria, as clear as the icy light of dawn. She hadn't arrived by accident. She chose us, Tom said in a low voice. It wasn't chance. It was decision. And there was more. Maria and Tom weren't alone on the ranch. Their dog Maple, an Australian shepherd, had recently given birth to 4 puppies. They were about 10 weeks old, small balls of joy that ran, barked, and piled up next to their mother to sleep. Maple cared for them tirelessly. She cleaned them, corrected them, fed them. Sometimes the lynx appeared near the window while the puppies played. She never made noise. She just watched. Perhaps she had seen Maria weeks before, cradling an injured crow in her arms, bandaging a broken wing, before releasing it to the sky. Perhaps she had seen Maple give up her place so that the smallest of her young could feed after the others. Perhaps she had recognized something, a softness, a security, something in those people, in that dog that spoke to the wild heart of a mother. She couldn't name it, but she trusted it. Her instincts told her, here they will be safe. The next morning, before the sun came up, Maria returned to the barn. She carried a small bowl of warm chicken broth that she placed carefully in a corner just beyond the straw nest. She didn't get too close. She said nothing. She left it there and withdrew. That night the bowl was empty, completely clean. The next day Tom left an old wool blanket carefully folded near the wall. They expected nothing in return, but still she came every night. During the day the lynx disappeared into the forest as silent as fog, but she always returned at nightfall. Sometimes Maria saw her sitting just beyond the barn, motionless like a statue. Her golden eyes shone under the snow in the twilight. She never growled, never fled. She watched, looked Maria in the eyes. There was no fear. There was something else. Recognition. Not exactly trust, but an instinctive certainty. She had made a decision. And while the wild mother disappeared among the trees each morning, someone else began to take her place. Maple the shepherd had felt curious from the beginning, sniffing the air, her ears alert. And now, with the lynx absent during the day, Maple began to stay near the barn, lying near the door, watching. When the kittens began to move and come out toward the light, it was Maple who watched them from a few steps away, with her tail still, her head tilted, her eyes soft. At first she kept her distance, but day after day she got a little closer, until she could see their small paws, their trembling ears, their big eyes blinking. She never barked, never touched them. She just watched with the same stillness that the lynx had shown before. Meanwhile, on the back porch, the puppies grew rapidly, jumping, rolling, and playing in the snow without rest. Sometimes when the light was perfect, Maria could see one of the lynx kittens peeking out from the barn, watching silently as the puppies played. Once, the smallest puppy got too close to the open barn doors. The lynx didn't bark and remained unmoved. She sat serene while the little wild kitten approached and smelled him. It was just an instant, but that moment seemed to be the first thread of something bigger. The mother lynx never showed aggression toward either Maple or the puppies. She always kept her distance, appearing silently during the last hours of the day and disappearing before the sun rose above the pines. She didn't hiss or growl when Maple approached. She didn't watch her young closely when the puppies were near. She didn't observe them with coldness, but not with tenderness either. It was as if she were measuring something invisible. On more than one occasion, when a puppy stumbled and fell near the barn door, letting out an unexpected yelp, the lynx would turn her head, move her ears, but her body remained still. She didn't react with alarm. She just watched as if she were evaluating, trusting not in the humans but in Maple. It was subtle, but Maria noticed it. The wild mother didn't just tolerate the dog's presence, she allowed it. And day after day, as the kittens grew stronger, their legs became firmer and their curiosity sharpened, the lynx began to stay away for longer periods, hunting again, returning later and later, until one afternoon everything changed. Maria looked out the kitchen window and stood motionless. There in the middle of the yard, among the jumble of fur and tails of the puppies, was a fourth kitten. It wasn't a puppy, it was a lynx. It moved clumsily among the group, smaller than the others, its spots standing out against the snow. It wasn't playing yet, it was just watching. Beside it, Maple remained alert, rigid at first. When their eyes met, Maple exhaled. She didn't bark and pushed it. She let it stay. Shortly after, a second kitten appeared, then a third. One by one they came out of the barn, sniffing the trail that the puppies had left on the snow, as if that world belonged to them too. The line between wild and domestic was erased that day. No one, not Mary, not Tom, not even Maple, tried to draw it again. By the end of that week, it was no longer strange for Maria and Tom to have their morning coffee and, looking out the window, see a scene that no one would believe if they didn't witness it. 4 puppies and 3 lynx kittens huddled under the same ray of sunlight, a soft and warm pile of spotted fur, drooping ears, wagging tails, sleeping and playing together. What began as cautious coexistence transformed into something deeper. They moved at the same rhythm. They waited for each other. They belonged to each other. There were no fences between them. No one taught them how to be together. They simply chose it. Maple watched it all attentively from a few steps away, never too close but always present. She intervened when necessary, a small push to whoever became too sleepy or too enthusiastic, but she never separated them. She let them be. Until the moment came when she had to intervene. Scout, the most active of the lynx kittens, the one Tom had named thus, was the one who started it. They were playing near the porch, stumbling over each other, when Scout pounced on the smallest puppy, knocking him down with a rough push. The puppy squealed and rolled, remaining still. It wasn't an act of aggression, just pure and unfiltered wild excitement. That's how Scout played, with more energy than his small body could contain. Then Maple got up. She didn't bark or growl. She moved with determination and interposed herself between them, firm, silent. Scout looked at her and hesitated, lowered his ears. Perhaps he thought that was the end of everything, that a line had been crossed. But Maple didn't stop there. She trotted to the porch and returned with an old rope toy, frayed and abandoned by one of the puppies. She placed it gently in front of Scout, not as punishment, but as invitation. The moment held still and silent. Scout took the rope and sat down. Shortly after, the puppy approached and snuggled next to the other again together. From the window, Maria whispered, "She gives her heart and doesn't divide it. She brings them together." The days passed, and with them winter began to loosen its grip. The snow began to melt in patches, leaving the soft earth exposed and forming muddy paths. The puppies and the little lynxes played for longer and ventured farther each day. Their world grew with each dawn. But one afternoon something wasn't right. Maple walked restlessly back and forth at the edge of the yard, with her ears alert and her nose glued to the ground. A low and anxious whimper escaped her throat. One of the puppies was missing, the smallest and quietest. Mary called him with a trembling voice while Tom searched the field, the barn, and the shed. Maple didn't stop moving, with muddy paws and wide eyes, guided by the wind. Panic seized everyone, and just when the silence became unbearable, something moved at the edge of the forest. From among the trees emerged the lynx. She was carrying something in her mouth, a small figure that limped, barely visible. It was the lost puppy. Mary held her breath, motionless. Maple and the lynx stood still. Then the wild mother walked calmly toward a clearing near the barn and gently deposited the puppy in the grass. He was muddy, trembling, but alive. He had crawled under the fence and hidden in a deep thicket. impossible to find except for her. The mother lynx, without collar, without name, without apparent reason to protect a young that wasn't hers, simply did it. She looked at Maple, not seeking approval or gratitude, just a fleeting moment of recognition. Then she turned and disappeared among the trees. Mary ran to kneel beside the puppy, wrapped him in her arms, and whispered with a broken voice, "The wild mother saved another's child." A few mornings later, while Tom was checking the fence deep in the forest, he heard unknown voices. He slowed his pace and then saw them. Two men with orange vests walking slowly among the trees with rifles on their shoulders. They weren't from the town, Tom would have known. One of them knelt beside a piece of soft earth, pointing to a print in the mud. It was clear. The pads, the claws, everything indicated a lynx. Tom held his breath behind a tree. "They're fresh," said one. "She has a den nearby. She might be breeding." "We should report it," responded the other. "She's too close to the pasture." Tom walked away silently without being seen. He returned home with slow steps, observing each branch as if the forest had changed. He didn't tell Mary anything at first, but she knew as soon as she saw him cross the door. When he finally told her, Mary whispered with a serious face, "If they find her, they'll take her away." "Her or something worse," Tom murmured. That night they sat together in silence, looking toward the barn from the porch. The lynx appeared as always, silent, elegant, invisible to the rest of the world, but not to them. Mary held her cup tightly and said with determination, "If they try to take her, they'll have to go through me." Tom looked at her and understood she meant it seriously. Mary added gently, "She brought her children here. We can't forget that just because it's inconvenient now." They both remained watching the darkness, the outline of the barn where the puppies and kittens slept huddled. "She's part of this family now," said Mary, "and I won't let anyone take family away." That same night the wind began to blow hard. The cold returned with the storm, and snow flew sideways over the fields, piling against the barn doors. The outside world disappeared in white. Mary stayed awake, late, watching from the window, but the lynx didn't come. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving a thick and heavy calm. The lynx still didn't appear. Mary searched among the trees, her boots crunching on the deep snow. She called softly near the barn, hoping to see a pair of golden eyes among the shadows. Nothing. That day passed and then another. The lynx had gone before, but never for so long, never without leaving a trace, and never without returning before nightfall to check that her young were well. The lynx kittens began to grow more slowly, in silence. They barely moved when Mary opened the barn door. They didn't cry, they didn't play, they just waited. The puppies, normally a whirlwind of movement and sound, approached the pile of hay and gently pushed the little lynxes huddled among them. Maple, who had long ago adopted the barn as part of her territory, didn't hesitate. She approached with slow, calm steps and entered directly into the nest. She settled among the small, cold bodies, wrapping them with her warmth, not just her puppies, but also the wild kittens. She placed her chin over the smallest one and stayed there. That night, Tom stood at the door, arms crossed, looking inside the barn. "If she doesn't return," he said in a low voice, "what are we going to do?" Mary didn't respond. She had no answer. She could only look toward the trees and wait. On the 5th day, just before dawn, it began to rain hard, cold, incessant. The earth soaked and the fields became rivers of mud and mist. Thunder rumbled low over the hills, and the sky hung dark, heavy. Maria opened the barn doors to check on the animals with a shrunken heart, and her coat already soaked by the rain. Then she saw her, standing in the doorway, thin, her fur soaked and stuck to her sharp ribs, her eyes sunken but calm. The lynx made no sound. Without hesitation, she walked through the mud, slow but firm, with her head low and her shoulders tense. She crossed the barn threshold, leaving the storm behind and advancing toward the warmth that awaited her. She didn't stop before the humans. She went straight to them, toward the pile of sleeping bodies huddled in the straw, the lynx kittens, the puppies, and Maple curled among all of them. The wild mother approached Maple. She raised her head, alert but calm, without moving. The lynx approached until she was so close that her breath touched the dog's fur. She didn't growl. She didn't tense. She inclined her head forward and gently caressed Maple's muzzle with her nose. It was a silent moment, firm, without warnings or fear. It was something else. Recognition, trust, perhaps gratitude. She looked once more at her kittens, at the puppies beside them, and then slowly turned. She curled up with all of them, pressing her body against the edge of the straw. She didn't need to reclaim them. She had never lost them. They were hers, and they were safe. Half a year passed. The yard no longer resonated with the clumsy and wild games of the 7 little ones. The puppies had grown strong, lean, confident. All but one had found new homes and new beginnings. Only one stayed. His name was Finn, and he wasn't alone. One of the lynx kittens, the quietest and most watchful of the 3, kept returning every night. He was called Ash. He never left completely, not like the others. Ash chose to stay. He slept curled up next to Maple on the porch, ran alongside Finn across the lawn, their bodies moving in unison, 2 forms, one wild, another domestic, sharing a single rhythm. They grew up like that, as brothers, different in everything except what really mattered. The mother lynx still came sometimes, just like before, silent, invisible unless one knew to look for her. She didn't come for food or shelter. She came to observe, but she no longer looked only at her kittens. Her eyes traveled over the yard, the porch, the figures moving among the tall grass, and sometimes she stayed longer than necessary, her amber eyes soft, almost human, because she wasn't looking at what she had left behind. She was looking at her family. Sometimes nature chooses a path we can't fully understand. Sometimes a wild mother chooses a human, and that doesn't just mean trust, it means family.